Hello, I'm Dr. Mikey Mewborn, and this is Church Ministry. Today we're looking at the topic, Administering Planning Activities and Program Ministries. This is a wonderful topic for us because it kind of helps us understand the groundwork of a church or the foundation of a church. We're going to look at mission statements or purpose statements. We're also going to look at the planning stage from the time that you set the plan in motion, what that looks like, the strategic plan, as well as long-range plans and short-range plans. And then we're going to look at the way of maybe having a building campaign, setting that type of thing up. So today's a great lesson because it helps us to see planning activities, but also the program ministry side of it. How do you program ministries, such as worship ministries or discipleship ministries? So it's good to be with you. Let's begin our study. Hello and welcome to Church Ministry. Today we're looking at administering planning activities and program ministries. We're getting our outline notes from Robert Welch's book, Church Administration. It's good to be with you. Let's begin our study. I want to start by looking at the topic, the mission and purpose statement. Now, we've looked at this before in our leadership training book, but in this book, we're going to look at some activities that are vital for developing a mission and purpose statement. Number one, determining what Scripture defines as appropriate activity. So, how is the Scripture guiding you in creating your mission or purpose statement? And that's vital to creating a Christian ministry, a nonprofit organization, or a church ministry. Whatever that is, it's vital that Scripture is the main support in what you are doing, or maybe foundational for what you're doing. And so you need to look at that first. Number two, determining what the Christian community defines as appropriate activity. So, when we're thinking about this mission statement, it's important to see what Scripture says, but also how is the Christian community defining it or explaining it, interpreting it. And so that's important as well. And then number three, determining how the church or organization itself defines its mission. And so it's also important to see how the church or organization is defining things out. And so we not only need to see what Scripture says, but what the church community or Christian community says, but then what does the actual church or organization have to say about it as well? And when you get these things in line or in order, then you can start to create the mission or purpose statement that your church is hoping to have. And as we go through this, what you'll see is that there are plans to execute the mission or the purpose statement throughout the whole ministry. And what you're ultimately going to try to do is have every area of the church or every arm of the church, or however you want to explain that, you want to say that it is speaking into or it supports the ultimate mission or purpose statement in general. And so there's going to be types of planning that are involved in that. So plans to implement the mission statement. You're going to have long-range planning, as well as short-range planning, as well as strategic plans. And I think you can look at it simply by saying a goal without a plan is just a wish. Isn't that correct? I mean, when you think about you setting goals in your life, if you have a goal that you really desire, it can be as simple as trying to learn an instrument or starting a new business. Whatever it might be, that goal that you have without a plan just becomes an idea or a wish and never becomes something. So if you want to think about this for just a moment, imagine, and your book shares this illustration as well, or example, it talks about a long-range plan. Well, maybe the long-range plan is to start a discipleship program on a college campus. The short-term goal would be to train ministers or train people to disciple others. And so maybe it'll take 3 to 6 months to train individuals to train others. And so you want to start there. But then from that, it'll begin to develop and it'll begin to grow exponentially. And so you want to create that long-range planning, then the short-range planning, and then you're going to have in all of that, what is the strategic plan to accomplish that? So you're going to have to look at what materials are we going to use? Are we going to need any spaces? Do we need to rent a space? Will there be any cost to this? All those types of things. Do we need a website? Do we need a Twitter account or a Facebook account? What do we need to do this? Who's going to run those things? And so if that's the case, then you're going to have a great strategy to accomplish that. So that's what we're looking at there, and these are plans to implement the mission statement. So when you're setting goals, we've probably seen this before, but it's the idea of being smart about setting your goals. Be specific, be measurable, be attainable, relevant, and time sensitive. These goals should be this: be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time sensitive. And so when we think through the goals that we are setting for ourselves, are they specific? Are they measurable? Can you measure them out? Can they be tracked? Are they something, the goals that you're setting, are they attainable? Is it something that you know for sure that can happen? If you put the time in, and of course the Lord is in it, you see that it's attainable. Then is it relevant? Is it worthwhile? Is there meaning to it? Or is it just kind of one of those weird goals that doesn't affect a lot of people? And then, do you have a time limit set on it for its completion? If you want to do it within 2 years, do you have that plan set up that way? So looking at that way would be very helpful. And then within your book, you also see some of the things such as planning for building and expansion. And I want to kind of look at some of those things as well as we go through this. Let's begin by talking about the master plan. Now, this is a very important thing to look at because we're looking at what will it take if you're planning on building or expanding a ministry. And so let's say you're trying to build a building, or you're trying to build onto a building. You're going to have a lot of facts and figures in order to go forward with that. Robert Welch says that church assessment is a big deal. Knowing where your church is at this point is going to matter for the future. So what do you have? How many people do you have? What kind of leaders do you have? What kind of structure do you have as like an org chart or things like that? So that's important. Also, evaluate current assets. So what type of property do you have? What is it worth? Or what type of building do you have? What is it worth? Are there things that you're willing to sell off so that you can build? Do you have money in the bank? And so you want to look at all those types of things because that's going to matter with either taking out a loan or maybe using that property as some form of assets or something that shows that there's equity in what you already have. Then you're going to pattern the growth process. So what has the growth process been like over the last several years? Have you seen growth? Where has that area been? Who has grown the most? Where have you seen the most baptisms? Or where have you seen the most families? What ages are they? And so you're going to look at some of those types of things. Then you're going to develop a stewardship plan for ways of bringing in money to the church so that we can be the best stewards of what God is supplying the church or organization. When I think about Build My Church campaign, I like to start here with the idea of the contractor, and this is in the top, the green there on the left. But when we think about a church campaign, we're going to start with the idea of the church, and the church is wanting to build a building or wanting to build onto their building. So what you're going to have to do is start looking at what's that going to take. So probably the first person you're going to contact is a contractor. What is this contractor, or maybe it's a company that's connected with an architecture group, and they're going to give you some ideas or point you in a certain way. Maybe it's a friend of somebody in the church, or it's somebody that's a part of the church and they can help in this process. So you want to start out by getting some insights from different contractors and see what they think. And also you're going to want to talk to architecture or architects at that time to try to figure out what does it look like that we're trying to do. They're going to ask a lot of questions to say, how big of an auditorium do you want? How big do you want your rooms? If you're building onto the education space, whatever it might be, you're going to need those types of things. You're going to need an estimator. And this is the idea of seeing what the estimated cost will be. What's it going to take to actually complete this project? Then marketing, communication. In order for the church to know what's really going on, you're going to have great marketing. You're going to have to be able to get this in front of the people all the time so that they know what they're giving to is a really big deal. And then the clergy, who's going to be involved in the whole process of letting people know what's needed. That's always vital when we're thinking about what do we need. Do we need more Sunday school space? Do we need more education space in general? Do we need an area for the students to be, or for the children's area, or for the nursery? So we're going to need clergy involved. Building committee will definitely need to be involved in all of that. Finance advisory team, letting you know what you have and is it being tracked, and are people being held accountable for what they're doing. And then of course financing. That'll normally be done through a bank if it's needed. Sometimes a church will try to pay as they go, and that's a wonderful thing to do, because if a church can pay as they go, it will save a tremendous amount of money given to a bank in interest. And so if there's a way for them to pay as they go, that's the best way. But if there's financing, you have to look at and see what the best bank is to use for that transaction, or for holding the money. And so this is what you're looking at there with the Build My Church campaign. Also, when we're talking about building or remodeling projects, there's a couple of different things you can look at there. Site evaluation and acquisition. So maybe you're wanting to buy a property and then you want to build a church on top of that. So you're going to have to see what you have or what you want to buy, and it's going to have to be evaluated and kind of understood what all is needed for that. Then building design, what is it going to take? I remember when I was part of a building project at a previous church that I was at, there was a lot of design that went in. I think it took maybe 6 to 8 months for the architect to go around and ask all the questions to all the clergy or to all of the pastors and ministers to see what they needed. And then once they gathered all that information, then they could create the design. And then the design was looked at by the building committee. And then that was brought before the church, and then it was voted on, things like that. So then you're going to have, after building design is done, you're going to have the construction. How long does the construction take? Is it going to take 1 year? Is it going to take 2 years? Is it a 5-year project? Are you building your church in phases? Whatever it might be, you need to think ahead. And then promotion and publicity, making sure that people know what you're doing at all times. And then finance and stewardship. That is so vital to make sure that the church is appropriately publicizing what they're doing. They're presenting it to the church, and then they're asking for funds that are needed for that project. And so that's how a lot of churches would do this, and that's people being good stewards of what's coming into the organization or to the church. I think this is a neat picture because it's a picture of, it looks like an older church that has a smaller building with a very high steeple, but along with that, they're building onto this church. And so here they are building onto it, and so they're going to have a lot more space. And what goes into this is a lot. So site evaluation, building design, construction, promotion, publicity, built finance, and stewardship, all that's going to be needed in order to accomplish this. All right, administering programs of worship. This is important because every church has a worship ministry. And worship ministry is not just music, it's a lot of other things too. Like one of the things is decorations ministry teams. This is important. Sometimes this is overlooked, but it's a vital aspect to the church. How does the church look aesthetically? Is it clean? Is it decorated correctly? Is it how it should be? Is the stage set up correctly? Are the light fixtures right? Are the pictures on the wall, are they straight? All these types of things really do matter, because when somebody comes in, a first impression can say everything. Speaking of first impressions, a greeters ministry team is always an important team to have at a church, regardless if it's a small church or a larger church. If you have greeters that can greet people at the front door or maybe in the parking lot and greet them all the way to their seat, it's going to go a lot further for you as a church member, trying to get people into your church, because they're seeing smiling faces, they're being welcomed, they feel like they're part of the family, and so that's what they're moving forward with. So greeters ministry is a wonderful thing, and there are some churches do this very, very well, and I've been to some of them, and I would encourage you, if that's not happening at your church, speak to somebody about that, because this is a big deal. First impressions, what a person sees when they first come to the church for the first time, is vital to whether or not they'll stay or not. Welcome Center ministry team. This is important as well, because you need to have a group of people that are knowledgeable of where everything is in the church. So if it's bed babies, if it's toddlers, if it's young children in general, or if it's a student ministry, senior adult ministry, any type of ministry in the church, we need to be able to tell people where to go. And so the Ministry Welcome Center team, they'll be helpful in that. Then an usher ministry team. These are wonderful people that are involved in the church service. And a lot of times they help people find their seat if the church is very full and there's not a lot of empty seats that can be seen from the back. So they would help in that process. Further with that, they might help in taking up an offering. Some of the ushers might even help in passing out the Lord's Supper. And that kind of leads you into the next one, ordinances ministry team. This team is very important because if you partake in the Lord's Supper or a baptismal type service, are there people that need to be in place to make sure that things are done correctly? Of course. So you need people in place to do those types of things. So if it's a baptism, you're going to need somebody to help a person to know where to go, to kind of be with them through the process, and maybe to be there to take pictures, whatever it might be. But you're going to need an ordinance ministry team or something like that to help them in the baptistry. Maybe as they're coming out of the water, that they're helped out of the water so that they don't slip or whatever it might be. Also, an ordinance ministry team would be important for preparing the Lord's Supper for passing it out to everyone. So that's another a great team that can be put into place there. As we go forward, we look in programs of worship. We see music ministry teams, and I just want to run through this quickly, but selection of leadership is critical in this, making sure that the people that are serving in the church are the right people. So if they're on stage, are they the right type of people that need to be up there? Choose appropriate music for worship. This is important, to know the people, know who they are, and then apply that kind of music to the worship service for them. I think that's important. Can you change some things here and there? Obviously, but understand the audience. That's important. Also, organize for variety. So there might be opportunity for things to change up in the order of service, the way things are done, or the types of music that's actually being led. And then budgets are essential for programs of worship with a music ministry team. They need to make sure that they stay within their budget, because it's easy when you look at technology, instrumentation, those types of things. You can quickly go over budget, and we don't want to do that. That's vital to stay within that. All right, then administering programs of discipleship. Develop an organizational chart that describes the structure of the program. Ensure leadership is adequately trained. Make sure the people that are in the discipleship program are leading it, that they know what they're doing. That is vital. Provide the necessary resources for a discipleship program. So if a discipleship program is rather large, they might need some things like audiovisual type of aids. They might need something such as sound equipment. They might need printouts. Whatever that is, it needs to be supplied to them. Develop training venues outside the walls. I love this one, because whether it's a formal type of training, maybe it's a coffee shop type of training, whatever it might be, it's important to have that type of thing happening outside the walls. It's very helpful when you are putting people into the realm of training, discipleship training. I always like to meet with people in a coffee shop and to talk to them about leadership training, because it would put us in a different place. It would use a platform of a business, and I could teach them some form of discipleship from that area. And of course, you could always have a good cup of coffee while you're doing it. So that was always a good way for me to do it, but there's a lot of different venues that you can use to do that. Administering programs of evangelism. Number one, know your constituency. Constituency just simply means the people, prospects, or supporters that are involved. So if you are starting an evangelism ministry, know the people that are into that. Know the people that are all in and excited about being a part of that. And you want to get them involved in what you're doing, because they're going to be the ones that help sell that program to other people. Then what you're going to do is you're going to go after the prospects for evangelism. So you want to take the church that meets in a building, you want to get them outside that building to go meet people so that they can win people to Christ. And Robert Welch gives us some pointers on this of what's a couple ways to do that, or important ways to do that. Number one, he says it must be scheduled. So if you're going to train, if you're going to set up a time, or if you want to set up a ministry where you visit people and you want to do some kind of visitation type ministry, he's saying it must be a scheduled event or a scheduled time. So like a Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock, we're going to go and visit people. So that's what he's talking about there. Because if it's a scheduled thing, people will come and then they'll want to go out and do that. I think that's kind of interesting, and I think it's good because it's saying there's some accountability to that. We'll pray before we go. We'll come back and talk about it as well. Number 2, it must involve training. So you don't just tell people, hey, I want you to go and visit so-and-so. See you later. You actually take time and train them in what to do. That's vital. Train them in what to do. Number 3, it must be facilitated. So there must be someone who is overseeing it and is giving maybe a visitor card to you so you know who they are, maybe you know who's in their family, you know exactly where they live, maybe a map is given to you, something like that. That's very helpful. Number 4, it must have follow-up and accountability. So after you visit somebody, it'd be very kind if you would send them an email, you'd call them, you would write them a letter saying, hey, it was so good to meet you. I really loved your house. Loved meeting your family, your kids, your pets, whatever it might be. And you let them know that you care about them in those types of ways. And then administering programs of ministry. Use identified leadership. So the book talks about paid professional staff. I don't necessarily think everybody should be paid or they have to be paid. Some people don't even want to be paid, but they are professional staff in what they do. And they need to be identified as that. So they're identified in what they do and who they are. And so that's important. So know who they are, know who the deacons are in the church, know who the chaplains are. In this sense, who are the people that are very good with hospital visits? Recognize those people and then get them serving in different capacities because they're the ones who are gifted to actually do that. And then ministry teams, who are the people that are running the ministry teams? What are the ministries that you have in your church? And so that'd be important to look at as well. And then require accountability. Make sure that the people know that they're being held accountable to what they do. So if it's a deacon, a pastor, a chaplain, a ministry team leader, whatever it might be, they're being held accountable for the different areas that they serve. And so there needs to be some accountability in that. Also, administering programs of fellowship, provide accurate and appropriate leadership, calendar and schedule fellowship events. Make sure that that's on the calendar and that people know about it because they don't want to have a conflict of interest or a scheduling conflict. Avoid disruption, confusion, and conflict, which can easily come into a church, into the fellowship. So you want to create programs that are going to help with unity and encouragement, not help or not cause division, those types of things. And then facilitate fellowship. Create opportunities for people to get together. Sometimes it's right before the worship service and there's time for people to come together and have some coffee and donuts and do whatever and have fun that way. Or maybe it's a fellowship activity where everybody's going to the park and having a picnic or going to the zoo. But let the church be involved in that. The whole church can be involved in that fellowship and growing together. It could be a program that the whole church puts on that's a 4th of July program, or it could be a fall festival, but whatever it is, make sure that you have these fellowships so the church stays close or feels close. And then organize for mission involvement. That's important. Provide for a variety of mission opportunities. And thoroughly investigate the project. So these are important when you're thinking about getting people knowledgeable, helping them become more knowledgeable about mission work, because we're all called to be on mission in some way, form, or fashion. And so how do we get them to understand what that is? Well, we organize mission involvement. Get them thinking about it. Local missions, national missions, international missions. And that way it'll get their creative ideas flowing, and then they will start coming up with their own ways of ministering, even in their own communities. All right? Well, this has been so good to be with you today. God bless you, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. All right, that concludes our study today. This has been a wonderful topic for us to look at because it's always important to know the foundational aspects of how a church functions and what are those main areas that should be dealt with when looking into starting a church or maintaining a church or even a nonprofit. And so these things have been very helpful for me in my life. I know they're helpful for you as well. God bless you, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.